The studio was silent, the kind of silence that makes the shuffle of papers sound like thunder. A small set had been arranged, two modern armchairs facing one another, a low table between them with two untouched glasses of water. The warm glow of the overhead lights gave the room a theatrical air. There was no live audience, no applause waiting in the wings. This was not spectacle. It was about questions and perhaps answers. The interviewer entered first, calm and poised, the kind of presence that could disarm even the most guarded guest. She carried an aura of balance, warmth and professionalism blended seamlessly. Moments later, the guest arrived. She moved with grace, a quiet command in her posture, and settled into her chair as though the room belonged to her. Her expression was polished, controlled, every detail calculated as if cameras were mirrors reflecting only what she allowed. "Thank you for being here tonight," the interviewer began, her voice gentle yet steady. "I know your time is precious." A small smile appeared on the guest's lips, though it stopped just short of her eyes. "Well," she replied smoothly, "I think the world deserves to hear the truth, don't you?" The interviewer nodded, unruffled. "That's exactly what we're here to do. To shed light on your journey, your challenges, and your hopes moving forward." At first, the questions were simple. The guest spoke about recent projects, her foundation, her carefully crafted vision of empowerment. She leaned back elegantly, hands folded as though she were giving a lecture rather than answering questions. It was polished, flawless, but also rehearsed. The interviewer could feel it, the performance beneath the surface. She shifted her notes and asked more directly, "There's been much discussion about how your life has changed since stepping away from the monarchy. How has the transition been, especially here in America?" The guest tilted her head and gave a sharp, humorless laugh. "Let's just say it's refreshing to finally live somewhere I don't have to bow to anyone." The interviewer blinked once, her face remaining calm, though the air seemed to tighten. Still, she pressed on. "And your husband? How has he adjusted to this new chapter?" A faint smirk crossed the guest's lips. "He's doing better than fine. He's learning what it means to be free, unshackled from outdated traditions. It's liberating for both of us." The silence that followed was heavier than before, thick enough to feel. The interviewer made a quick note before continuing carefully. "Some have wondered if there's been any tension between you two as you navigate such a public transition. Life in the spotlight can be tension?" The guest interrupted with a sharp laugh. "People always imagine drama where there isn't any. We're stronger than ever. The only tension comes from outsiders who can't stand to see us happy." Her voice was smooth, but the edge beneath it was unmistakable. The walls were going up, brick by brick. Wanting to tread carefully, the interviewer asked, "You've often been compared to the Princess of Wales. Do you feel pressure from those comparisons?" The guest's jaw tightened, her pause deliberate. "Pressure? No. Annoyance, yes. Imagine being measured constantly against someone simply because of who you married. It's laughable, really." The words lingered, sharp and heavy. The interviewer didn't flinch, though her eyes flickered ever so slightly. She shifted again, this time with softness. "And your children, though you've tried to shield them, they remain in the public eye. How do you navigate that as a mother?" The guest leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "My children are off limits. The very idea that people think they're entitled to discuss them says a lot about society's obsession with invading privacy. Maybe journalists should spend more time on actual issues and less on kids." The words landed with a sting, though the interviewer kept her composure intact. The air in the studio seemed cooler now, heavier. What had begun as polite conversation was shifting into something taut and uneasy. The interviewer adjusted her posture, steady as ever. She had faced senators, CEOs, even world leaders, but this was different. Here was a guest wrapped in charm yet armored in entitlement. A performance so controlled it dared her to break it. She leaned forward with the faintest of smiles. "Let's talk about your partnership with streaming platforms. There have been reports of discussions for a new season and speculation about disagreements over compensation. Can you tell us what's really happening?" The guest gave a soft, airy laugh, polite on the surface but cutting underneath. "Reports? You mean rumors? I find it fascinating how much energy is spent speculating about numbers when the focus should be on the message." Her eyes gleamed for a brief moment, not with warmth but with challenge. And just like that, the interview had shifted entirely. Theatrics had given way to a quiet duel. Words, pauses, glances, all weapons on an invisible battlefield. The silence that followed said more than any answer could. The studio felt tighter now, the silence between questions charged with unspoken challenge. The interviewer leaned forward slightly, her notes resting calmly in her lap. "So," she asked carefully, "you're saying the reports are untrue?" The guest's reply came crisp, sharp. "I'm saying whatever discussions my team and I have are private. People assume that just because I've lived in the public eye, they're entitled to every financial detail of my life. That isn't journalism. That's gossip." The words hung heavy. The interviewer's expression didn't waver, though she inhaled slowly. She knew what this was becoming, a sparring match. "I understand your point," she said evenly. "But when you and your husband signed one of the most publicized entertainment deals in recent history, surely you expected some level of scrutiny." The guest's eyes flashed. "Scrutiny or obsession? There's a difference. And let's be honest, if my name weren't mine, nobody would care. The moment a woman speaks up, suddenly she's difficult, demanding, or greedy." Her indignation carried a rehearsed precision, every word chosen like a blade. The interviewer folded her hands. "Speaking of the public," she began gently, "you've often said you value your privacy. Yet your projects, from documentaries to memoirs, open doors into your life. Some argue that's contradictory. How do you respond?" A sharp exhale, a tight smile. "That's lazy criticism. Sharing my truth isn't the same as surrendering my privacy. People can't seem to understand that. Perhaps they'd prefer women stay silent." The pen froze above the interviewer's notebook. That wasn't just defensive, it was accusatory. She looked up, her calm mask straining slightly. "No one here is asking you to be silent," she replied softly. "I'm asking how you draw the line." "The line," the guest said coolly, "is mine to draw." A silence followed, thick and uncomfortable. The interviewer could feel it pressing in, the shift from conversation to confrontation undeniable. Still, she pressed forward. "You've spoken before about the monarchy and the challenges you faced. Looking back now, do you have any regrets about how you left?" The guest's laugh was dry, edged with scorn. "Regrets? None. I chose peace over performance, authenticity over servitude. I should be applauded for leaving a system that thrives on silence and submission." The interviewer tilted her head. "Some might argue that same system gave you the platform that allows you to speak today." That was the crack. The guest stiffened, her expression sharpening. The warmth she'd held for the cameras drained. "Oh, so now the credit goes to the institution," she snapped. "You think my visibility comes from a crown instead of my talent, my intelligence, or my work ethic?" The interviewer's tone softened, but her words remained pointed. "I'm only suggesting your life changed dramatically because of that connection. That's a fact, isn't it?" "It's your version of a fact," came the icy reply. "What you call a platform, I call a cost. Maybe instead of framing it as a gift, you should acknowledge the trauma that came with it." The tension was visible now, even to the crew behind the cameras. Quiet glances passed between them. "I do understand it wasn't easy," the interviewer said, her voice calm but firm. "But surely you can see how some view your comments as what?" The guest cut in sharply. "Ungrateful, bitter. That's always the label, isn't it? The outspoken woman is ungrateful. The quiet one is a saint. I know the narrative." The interviewer set her pen down, folding her hands. "I'm not labeling you. I'm trying to understand." "Then maybe," the guest said, leaning forward, "you should start by listening instead of assuming." The air went cold. The courtesy that had framed the beginning was gone. What remained was a duel, measured words, sharp edges. The interviewer sipped her water, steadying herself. Across from her, the guest sat tall, one leg crossed neatly, chin lifted in defiance. "Let's look ahead," the interviewer said finally, her voice a touch softer. "You've spoken of empowerment and using your voice to inspire. What's next? More projects? Another series?" The guest's smile curved into something close to mockery. "I find it amusing how obsessed people are with what I'll do next. Maybe the world should focus less on my next move and more on what I've already achieved." The interviewer nodded gently. "Of course, but you are a public figure. Your choices influence millions. Naturally, there's curiosity about the future." "Curiosity," the guest repeated, disdain curling in her tone. "Or obsession, because it feels far more like the latter. Every time I breathe, there's a headline. Every time I blink, there's an article." The words echoed in the hushed studio, settling like smoke. Two women locked in a quiet battle, their civility wearing thin. And though the cameras kept rolling, the interview was no longer about questions and answers. It had become something else entirely, a fight for control, truth, and narrative. "I'm not a spectacle," she said firmly, her voice carrying both exhaustion and defiance. "I'm a human being." The interviewer nodded softly, acknowledging the weight of her words. "I understand that completely," came the calm reply. "But with influence comes scrutiny. That's the nature of public life." A short, sharp laugh broke the tension as she shook her head. "Easy to say when you're the one asking the questions. You get to control the narrative, ask, interpret, edit. Meanwhile, I'm left defending my existence." For the first time, the composure of the interviewer faltered, her eyes betraying a flicker of sting before she steadied herself. "That's not entirely fair," she said quietly. "This is meant to be a conversation, not a confrontation." Leaning back, smooth but sharp, the reply came with chilling calm. "Then perhaps you should reconsider the tone of your questions." A heavy silence followed. Even the crew hesitated, unsure whether to keep rolling, but the interviewer stood her ground. "Your journey has been complicated," she continued carefully. "There have been moments of triumph and moments of controversy. There's a perception." Perception," came the interruption, slicing through like glass. "People love that word as if it's reality. But it's not. It's manipulation, spun by tabloids and lazy reporters." The interviewer tilted her head. "So every story written about you is false?" "I didn't say that," came the cold reply. "But most are, and the rest are twisted just enough to feed the narrative people want to believe. It's pathetic." The interviewer set her notes aside, patience wearing thin. Her voice was soft, but steel ran beneath it. "I've interviewed world leaders, survivors, activists who've faced unimaginable pressure. Yet you treat every question as an attack." A slow, deliberate smile spread. "Maybe that's because every question is one." The bluntness left the interviewer momentarily surprised. "That's not true," she whispered. "Isn't it?" came the reply. "You invite me here, pretend to be interested in my causes, then circle back to gossip, money, my family. Forgive me if I don't feel honored." The tone had shifted completely. No subtlety, no diplomacy, just raw tension under studio lights. The interviewer straightened, cracks forming in her professionalism. "With respect, these are not gossip topics. They are things you have publicly discussed. Your own statements invite clarification." A dangerous calm entered the room as the response came. "Clarification or interrogation? There's a difference. One seeks truth, the other seeks fault. And you seem far more interested in the latter." The room grew cold, the control booth silent, no one daring to cut in. Folding her hands, the interviewer exhaled through her nose. "What I'm interested in is accountability. If you want to tell your story, questions are part of it. Fair, reasonable questions." The word hung in the air before being thrown back. "Accountability," she echoed. Such a convenient word, always hurled at women who speak, never at the institutions that silence them. The silence stretched so heavy it seemed it could split the walls. When the interviewer spoke again, her tone was careful, firm. "Do you ever worry your message gets lost in the way you deliver it?" For the briefest moment, surprise flickered across the face opposite her before irritation returned. "Meaning what?" "Meaning that sometimes confidence can sound like condescension, and that makes it hard for people to hear what you're really trying to say." The air froze. Eyes darkened, the smile vanished. "Are you suggesting I'm arrogant?" The interviewer didn't move. "I'm suggesting that tone can overshadow words." A slow exhale followed, icy gaze unblinking. "You know what's funny? When a man speaks firmly, he's called strong. When a woman does it, she's called difficult. I guess even seasoned journalists fall into that trap." It was a cutting, practiced deflection. But this time the interviewer didn't let it pass. "Strength," she said softly, "also means being able to listen." The reply came like a knife. "Then maybe you should try it sometime." The words landed like a slap. For several unbearable seconds, silence reigned, thick, electric, pulsing with restrained fury, as though the entire studio held its breath, waiting for what might come next. What began as an interview had turned into a battlefield. The studio was silent except for the faint buzz of overhead lights, a silence so heavy it pressed on everyone present. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed, chin tilted upward with defiance, while the interviewer held her composure, carefully weighing her next words. It was meant to be a thoughtful conversation, but now it was a clash of wills. Behind the cameras, the crew exchanged anxious glances. A producer raised his hand to signal a break, but the interviewer subtly waved it off. She leaned forward, voice steady. Let's take a breath. We both want this to be fair. So tell me, when you look back on everything, the royal life, the media, the documentaries, do you ever think about how it's affected the public's trust in your story? The response came with a sharp laugh. Trust? That's a strange word considering how the public has treated me. I don't owe trust to anyone. People twisted my words for years. Why would I care what they believe now? The interviewer's eyes narrowed. So it doesn't matter to you whether people believe your version of events? I'm saying people will believe whatever they're told. That's how propaganda works. The press paints me as the villain because it sells. And frankly, it's lazy journalism. The word lazy stung. The interviewer's tone tightened. I can assure you I take journalism very seriously. I've dedicated my life to it. Then maybe dedicate it to something truthful, came the sharp retort. The air thickened. The interviewer's jaw tightened. That's unfair. I've treated you with respect, have you? Because from here, this feels like an ambush. Every question carries judgment. The interviewer's patience cracked. There's no judgment. But when you speak publicly about your life, it's reasonable to ask questions. That's accountability. A thin smile followed. Accountability, your favorite word. You hold others accountable, but never yourselves. The interviewer straightened, her calm slipping. Enough. I've given you nearly an hour to tell your story, but all you've done is deflect and condescend. Every time someone engages with you, everyone's against you, everyone's wrong but you. For the first time, she blinked without a comeback. The interviewer pressed on. You want to be understood, but you make it impossible. You push away questions, insult the people asking them, and wonder why people doubt your sincerity. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is treating this interview like the world owes you something. You talk about empowerment and truth, but what I see is arrogance. You've built a brand on victimhood while refusing responsibility for your own words. The atmosphere shifted, the crew frozen. You have no right to speak to me that way. I have every right when you dismiss anyone who asks a genuine question. Respect goes both ways. The world gave you a platform most will never have, and here you are blaming everyone but yourself. She stood abruptly, her microphone cord pulling tight. This is over. I won't be disrespected. The interviewer didn't move. You're walking away because you don't like being challenged. That's not strength. That's entitlement. The words stopped her mid-step. Her face flushed with anger. Entitlement? Do you have any idea what I've been through? The hate, the lies, the racism? And you sit there judging me like you know my life. I don't judge your life, the interviewer said calmly. I judge your behavior here and now. And yes, it's entitled because countless people endure pain daily without using it to excuse cruelty. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, she ripped off her microphone and threw it onto the table. This is unbelievable. You people pretend to be fair while trying to humiliate me. The interviewer remained composed. No one humiliated you. You did that yourself. The words froze her. For a second, something flickered. Hurt, maybe even regret, but it vanished. Without another word, she stormed off, heels echoing across the empty studio. The interviewer exhaled slowly, leaning back in her chair. The control room stayed silent, unsure whether to cut the feed. At last, she turned toward the nearest camera. To our viewers, she said steadily, I want to apologize for how this unfolded. This was not the conversation we intended, but sometimes honesty isn't comfortable. Her gaze held the camera for a long moment before the lights dimmed and the recording ended. The next day, headlines screamed about the walkout, but those in the room would remember the atmosphere more than the words. Two women, two versions of power, colliding in a single unforgettable moment.